Mr. President, I'm very honored to speak to the General Assembly on behalf of the Government of Canada. I recognize that I'm doing so on the traditional territory of the Lenape people. First of all, Mr. President, I'd like to congratulate you on your election as President of the General Assembly. If I may say so, it's wonderful to see a member of the PR community taking charge, and it's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the time ahead. I'd also like to offer our sincere condolences to all those who have lost loved ones in the terrible floods in Libya, as well as with our dear friends in Morocco who are mourning the many lives that have been taken by the devastating earthquake. Let me assure you that Canada stands ready to assist in whatever way we can facing these challenging situations. And we're thinking today, as we see the very, very tragic photographs and videos of the Armenians who are leaving Nagorno-Karabakh after such a challenging experience over the last several months, indeed years. Mr. President, just before coming to New York, I had the opportunity to work with an Indigenous Council of Leaders in Northern Ontario in Canada, and they had what I thought was a very effective slogan, which was quite simple. It talked about the power of unity and the dignity of difference. And I think it's a theme that we should perhaps think about. Sometimes people talk about the failure of the United Nations. And I point out to them that, no, it's the divided nations that are failing. When we are united, we succeed. It's when we are divided that we fail. And so I want to suggest that we need to seize this time and all the times that we have to make a difference, but we'll only succeed if we come together. We are at the halfway point in trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which we all agreed we would work on 8 years ago. We recently adopted the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, and we are approaching the first global stocktaking of the Paris Agreement. But listening to the speeches this last week, it's been very clear that there is a profound consensus that we are very far behind where we need to be to meet the commitments that we have all made to our populations and that we have all made to one another. The health of our planet, of our people, of our institutions, the well-being of all of our populations, and indeed our global economy are all at serious risk. When I met earlier last week with Wilton Littlechild, who's a former Grand Chief of the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations and a member of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and yes, a negotiator of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, he's talked to me very directly about how it's so critical that we not look at the issues in isolation. As we speak here, we go from topic to topic and from things that we have to cover to the next thing we have to cover. But it's important that we see them all as a whole. We need to recognize how things are connected. Combien de gens dans vos pays? Je peux vous assurer que les Canadiens et Canadiennes, ils aussi, s'inquiètent du coût de la vie. Ils aussi s'inquiètent aussi de l'intelligence artificielle, de l'ingérence étrangère et de la mésinformation et la désinformation. Les Canadiens vivent aussi les crises climatiques et environnementales. Comme vous le savez très bien, comme les citoyens de New York savent très bien, cet été, les Canadiens ont connu les feux de forêt les plus destructeurs de l'histoire de notre pays. On n'a jamais vu avant cet été jusqu'à quel point nous sommes liés tous ensemble. Des feux à une échelle jamais vue, brûlant en même temps, partout. Mais le Canada n'est pas unique. Les incendies ont fait rage partout dans le monde à une échelle sans précédent. Il ne s'agissait pas d'une fenêtre sur notre avenir, mais plutôt d'un témoignage de notre présent. Notre réponse à ces défis difficiles ne doit pas être complaisante, divisée ou nostalgique du passé. Il ne s'agit pas de pointer du doigt ou de chercher des panacées. Il s'agit de prendre des mesures concrètes pour aider à relever, tant au Canada que dans le monde entier, les défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés tous ensemble. So, we are taking steps at the national level, of course. And it is entirely right and normal that all of us would be taking steps at home to deal with the crisis that we face. For example, in Canada, we've made a decision to admit more people into our country than ever before, because we have found and discovered that immigration has made us a better country and it's made us a better place to live. We've also decided to put a price on carbon, because we know that we must do everything we can to stem climate change, even as we know that we have to do more ourselves. We believe strongly that reducing emissions is a duty that is shared, but so is the need to ensure something else, and that is the access to capital on longer terms and with more favorable rates to help in the green transformation of the global economy. That is why we have now agreed to donate more of our special drawing rights at the International Monetary Fund. As the Prime Minister announced last week, we have made the decision to grant 48% of our own drawing rights to other countries. That's the highest number among those who have the drawing rights, and we would encourage others to follow that example. We've also continued to search for ways to break down gender barriers and to end systemic racism, to not be afraid to describe it as such, and to say that it's something we have to continue to deal with, to protect and to promote the rights of two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual individuals and communities in all their diversity. And let me say from this platform why we do that and why I describe it in this way. It is because it is so fundamental to human nature itself to let people be themselves, to let people be who they are, and to have the right to celebrate their own identity without repression, without division, without discrimination. It's foundational for us. And yes, so is walking the path towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Because with full humility and in full recognition of our own faults, we have found strength in diversity, purpose in equity, and unity in inclusion. And like many others, we have found greater peace in finally admitting the truth of who we are. Mr. President, late last month, at the invitation of the government of Panama, I had the opportunity to visit the Darien Gap, which is the jungle that serves as the border between Colombia and Panama. I saw the irregular migration crisis unfolding there, as we call it, where, in real terms, what is it? It's hundreds of thousands of men, women, and especially children who are risking their lives to cross the gap. The sheer number of people who are crossing and on this journey is shocking, and it has to be seen in a much broader light. I had the chance to speak with individuals from many different countries, of course from the region, but also from Afghanistan, from China, and from Syria. And this regional crisis, which is now very much in the Americas, is part of a global crisis. There are today over 108 million people that are forcibly displaced around the world. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya remain displaced in Bangladesh and in their native Rakhine, as the military junta continues its brutal and illegal crackdown in Myanmar. In Afghanistan, where the de facto authorities are repressing the rights of women and girls, over 5 million people are displaced or refugees. After more than 12 years of war, more than 12 million Syrians are internally displaced or refugees in neighboring countries. 2 million have now been displaced by the conflict in Sudan, including those already scarred by the genocidal violence in Darfur. Les conflits sont le principal moteur de cette crise mondiale, tout comme les changements climatiques, les catastrophes naturelles et l'insécurité économique. Les personnes qui cherchent à traverser la région de Darien fuient tous ces facteurs de déplacement. Les nombreuses personnes qui cherchent à traverser m'ont fait voir les conséquences de notre action ou notre inaction ici aux Nations Unies. Et ma visite a renforcé ma conviction profonde que ce que nous disons et ce que nous faisons ici aux Nations Unies est profondément important dans la vie des gens que nous représentons. Nous devons nous rappeler notre pouvoir collectif. Comme j'ai dit avant, que le pouvoir est dans l'unité et non pas dans la division. Et notre responsabilité de faire le plus de bien possible pour le plus grand nombre de personnes. J'étais touché, franchement, par le travail remarquable des Nations Unies et de toutes les organisations humanitaires que j'ai visitées. Et nous voyons partout dans le monde que les besoins humanitaires ont atteint des sommets historiques. Pourtant, le financement est nettement insuffisant. Nous connaissons tous que les solutions les plus durables sont politiques. Ils doivent s'attaquer aux causes sous-jacentes des crises humanitaires tout en trouvant des solutions durables qui respectent la dignité humaine et les droits de la personne et créent les cadres durables pour le développement économique et de la prospérité. C'est aussi vrai en Afghanistan qu'au Myanmar, en Syrie qu'en Soudan. We're also at a crossroads, as you said, Mr. President, in your opening address. We're at a crossroads in history on two issues that are closely linked, gender equality and democracy. I was in the hall when the President of South Africa was speaking, and he eloquently reminded us in his speech that the achievement of the SDGs depends on the empowerment of women in all spheres of life. He called for the provision of adequate health services to every woman, child, and adolescent, every kid, and made a passionate plea for the equal representation of women in decision-making. President Ramaphosa is absolutely right. Yet, sometimes today, we are told at the UN, when we're in our negotiations, that gender is too divisive an issue. We're told that to seek ambition in this area is insensitive. I've heard these words myself, that it should be put aside for compromise. Well, I could not disagree more. For us, gender equality is not an issue to be bartered against perceptions of progress, nor is it just a nice to have or something that can be said but always has to be qualified. Gender equality, the equality between men and women, the equality between all human beings, it is core to our dignity. It is the foundation of freedom. It is the foundation of justice. And it is the foundation of peace. If we cannot treat ourselves as equals, we will never achieve the things that we want to achieve. It's also essential in our work on financing for development and in the reform of the global financial architecture. And we are committed to responding to the calls of developing countries in these discussions. As I've mentioned before, it's not just what I say, it's what we do. And what we have done is indicate and take the decision that we're moving forward with respect to the SDRs as we've been asked to do. Sustainable economic growth cannot be realized if the opportunities for women who represent half the population, are suppressed. At the same time, as we put great emphasis on the importance of equality, we also have to uphold the values of free and democratic societies. We cannot bend the rules of state-to-state relations for political expediency, because we've seen and continue to see the extent to which democracies are under threat through various means of foreign interference. But the truth is, if we don't adhere to the rules that we've agreed to, the very fabric of our open and of our free societies may start to tear. We also have to protect and promote the principles of equality and universality of access to health care for all, including sexual and reproductive health rights for all women. By building open, inclusive societies, and by promoting and protecting human rights for all, everyone benefits. And this is how we get closer to equality and get closer to justice. Monsieur le Président, je tourne maintenant à la situation en Haïti. Nous devons également travailler ensemble pour faire face à cette crise urgente, la crise humanitaire, politique et civile en Haïti. La semaine dernière, le Premier ministre Trudeau a convoqué une réunion du groupe consultatif spécial sur Haïti, que le Canada est fier de présider. Nous sommes reconnaissants de la participation des dirigeants d'Haïti, des pays des Caraïbes et de bien d'autres. Et j'ai beaucoup apprécié, si je peux dire, le discours qui a été donné ce matin par le ministre des Affaires étrangères de la Jamaïque. Nous avons entendu très clairement que la situation en matière de sécurité en Haïti va mal. Le viol est systématiquement utilisé comme arme, la violence, la corruption et l'impunité sont la norme. Alors, nous appuyons sans réserve l'intensification des efforts déployés par le Conseil de sécurité des Nations unies pour régler la situation en priorité. L'offre du Kenya de diriger une mission d'assistance de soutien à la sécurité en Haïti témoigne de son leadership et de sa solidarité. Nous saluons également des promesses de contribution faites par la Jamaïque, les Bahamas et d'autres pays. Et nous félicitons les pays et les organisations internationales qui se sont joints au groupe de coordination de l'aide à la sécurité internationale qui a été annoncé en juin dernier par la ministre des Affaires étrangères du Canada, Mme Mélanie Joly. Le Canada a beaucoup investi dans le secteur de sécurité en Haïti et nous allons continuer de faire ce travail. Nous encourageons les autres à se joindre à nous dans cet effort. En même temps, nous poursuivons notre appel pour un dialogue politique inclusif et nous encourageons encore toutes les parties prenantes à travailler ensemble dans un esprit de compromis pour le bien du peuple haïtien. C'est essentiel pour rétablir l'ordre constitutionnel, ouvrir la voie des élections libres et équitables et ultimement s'attaquer aux causes profondes de la violence. Mais avant tout, une approche globale, une approche qui appuie les solutions dirigées par Haïti et qui comprend des mesures urgentes en matière de sécurité, d'aide humanitaire et de développement est absolument essentielle. Security for everyone living in Haiti is a precondition for all else that we must do. But in so doing, we must reinforce this security by working on the humanitarian crisis and on the development crisis and on the political crisis. We have to show what we can do in this joined-up effort. Mr. President, over the past decades, the Middle East and the wider world have struggled with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It was an issue in 1945. It's an issue today. Today, Canadians are greatly concerned by the trajectory of the conflict, noting in particular the rising levels of violence in the West Bank and in Israel, the continued risk of escalation between Israel and Gaza and groups in Lebanon, and the continued growth of Israeli settlements that do not have a foundation in international law. The measures and rhetoric that make two states impossible has to stop. We are committed to the goal of a just, a comprehensive, and a lasting peace in the Middle East, which includes the creation of a Palestinian state living side by side in peace and in security with Israel. We urge both parties to return to the negotiation table and make the difficult compromises that will be required to achieve this result. We firmly believe that unilateral actions that jeopardize efforts for peace and the failure to embrace all that is entailed in creating two states not that are bickering and at war and fighting each other, not that are threatening each other, but two states that are living in peace, in mutual recognition, and with this concept of the dignity of difference. Unless we get there, we will only have deeper conflict, and this has to be avoided. Monsieur le Président, le chemin que nous emprunterons ensemble à ce carrefour de l'histoire va déterminer l'avenir de notre organisation, et il aura une incidence dans la vie de tous nos concitoyens. Nous avons vu le pouvoir de veto des membres permanents du Conseil de sécurité utilisé pour empêcher le Conseil de réagir aux atrocités et aux agressions. Nous appuyons l'autolimitation du veto par tous ces membres permanents dans les situations où des civils risquent de commettre des crimes atroces. Nous soutenons également les efforts visant à élargir le nombre de membres élus du Conseil afin de garantir une représentation plus équitable d'un plus grand nombre de pays en développement dans le monde. Et nous mettons au défi tous les membres permanents d'accepter plus pleinement et publiquement la nécessité de devenir plus efficace, plus inclusif et plus transparent. C'est le moment pour la réforme. Cet appel n'arrête pas au Conseil de sécurité. Tous nos processus intergouvernementaux de tous les organes des Nations unies doivent devenir plus efficaces. Nous devons être ouverts à apporter les changements nécessaires. C'est à nous, maintenant, de décider. Oui, nous sommes à mi-chemin d'horizon 2030. Et oui, nous sommes pris de retard. Mais nous sommes aussi capables de corriger la situation et d'aller de l'avant ensemble. Le Canada est convaincu que nous pouvons le faire. Le multilatéralisme a toujours évolué. Dans le passé, c'est le cas. Ce sera le cas dans l'avenir. Mais nous devons agir. Nos institutions n'ont pas besoin d'être statiques, y compris l'architecture financière internationale. Nous avons fait notre travail avec la Jamaïque, avec nos collègues de Barbados, Madame Motley, le secrétaire général. Nous croyons tous aux possibilités de changement et de réaliser nos efforts et de faire une avance importante. Nous allons continuer d'investir comme nous avons fait dans le passé, parce que nous croyons que c'est les Nations unies, car nous croyons que cette organisation peut aider à bâtir une paix durable. Mr. President, I have to conclude on a somber note. What remains the greatest threat to global peace and security today, and there's no getting around it, there's no avoiding it and not calling it for what it is, and that is Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We wake up every morning, our time, to the news of which city has been bombed, which children have been maimed, which communities have been destroyed. The Charter clearly commits us all to end the scourge of war. Those are the first words of what we are determined to do. The Russian Federation signed the Charter. And yet, despite that signature, for 580 days, the Russian Federation has waged an illegal and an immoral war of aggression against a fellow member of this organization, Ukraine. The Russians went to the International Court of Justice and said, no, it's not an invasion, it's self-defense. We're exercising our jurisdiction under Article 51. And besides, there was a genocide caused by the Ukrainians. And the only problem with these arguments is the court has looked at them and said, no, it's not true. This is an invasion of one country by another country. It's the most fundamental breach of the Charter one can imagine. The costs of this war are staggering. There's, first of all, the unimaginable costs counted in lives. Thousands and thousands. Hospitals, schools bombed, people displaced, children abducted, forcibly deported. President Zelensky was right when he said it's a global natural disaster. It's caused volatility to food and energy prices when the global economy is already struggling. And what has Russia's response been to this? Well, first of all, to deny that it's happening, to call it a special military operation that's caused by Article 50, generated by Article 51. These are just lies. It's not compatible with what we know and can see are the facts. Russia has also blocked the Black Sea Grain Initiative. It's holding the world's food supply hostage. It's causing the price of living to go up in every single country in the world. It's putting millions of people unemployed in countries all around the world. It's turning countries against each other. We have to realize Russia does not have the best interests of any of us in mind. And we simply cannot allow President Putin and his enablers to pretend the Charter doesn't exist, to make a mockery of this foundational law in the relationships between us. Truth is, Russia has committed a terrible aggression. It is committing a terrible aggression each and every day. We have a report earlier this week that tortures are being committed as a matter of state policy. And we believe Russia has to be held accountable. And we are determined to see justice served. Canada welcomes the indictments by the International Criminal Court against President Putin and his Commissioner for Children's Rights, because we believe that no one is above the law. But what has the Russians done even this week? This week they've issued arrest warrants against three senior officials and judges of the International Criminal Court. The president of the International Criminal Court, who speaks from this dais every year describing the work of the court, is under an arrest warrant from the Russians. Imagine what it would be like that we live in a world where, imagine in everyone's country, if some criminal who's charged says, well, that's fine, I'm just going to take out the Chief Justice. These are terrible things. We're going to do everything we can to support Ukraine as it continues to defend itself, its people, its identity, its sovereignty, and its territorial integrity. We believe this is fully in line with our commitments under the Charter and international law. And we believe as well that it's the war that is not legal. And it is the war that is fundamentally immoral. And it is a war that has been started by Russia, and Russia can end it. Russia could end it right now by simply saying it's over and pulling its troops back. End of war. There'll be no invasion of Russia. It's over. Peace would come. People say they want peace. Tell that to the Russians. They're the ones who can create peace with a snap of a finger. So let me go back to where I started, Mr. President, just to say we must seize the time that we have to make a difference. Nous devons saisir les opportunités qui existent et qui sont devant nous pour faire la différence. We have to find within ourselves the ability to create unity where there is division. We have to find inside ourselves the capacity to recognize the importance of accepting differences. And if we can do that, then we can create a United Nations that will be worthy of the name. That is our job, that is our obligation, and that is the work we have to do. Thank you very much.